So let's shift our focus to our next segment, an engaging panel discussion titled Never Say Never, Recovering from the Unexpected. Please welcome our panelists, beginning with someone who is no stranger to the CFS stage, Bridget Singratanakul. NATCA Surface Awareness Rep, Chris Corapi. Program Manager for Office Surveillance Services Surface Team, Matt McCann. Eastern Service Area Quality Assurance Runway Safety Manager for the FAA, Kyle Vincent. And also someone who's not a stranger to the CFS stage, LAX Airport Safety Liaison, Airline Pilots Association, Jason Herman.
Thank you guys for joining me today, obviously. So today we're really going to focus on a couple different things. We're going to focus on technology advancements on the flight deck with the pilots. We're also going to talk about some technology advancements for controllers, right? And then additionally, we're going to look at runway incursions and how can we prevent runway incursions throughout the NAS. Now, first off, what I'd like to do is help the audience get to know each of us a little bit more and what our role is and how we actually interact with the National Airspace System a little bit more. So Jason, I'll start off with you.
Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jason Herman. I'm a 757 and 767 captain with Delta Airlines. Most relevant to this audience is I'm a safety liaison for the Airline Pilots Association. My primary area of responsibility is in Los Angeles, working with the airport and ATC, but that spans much beyond LAX at times in the rest of the Western Pacific region. My passion and my area of expertise is working with airport operators, talking about construction projects, charting, working with facilities to help solve problems and make things better in the NAS.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kyle Vincent. As they mentioned, I'm the Eastern Service Area Runway Safety Team Manager and also the Acting Quality Assurance Manager for the Eastern Service Area. Like many of you in this room, my background is all in air traffic. I was a controller for about 15 years at Memphis, Miami, and Atlanta, as well as some time in the Quality Assurance Office as a specialist. I love aviation. I love flying. I'm a private pilot and instrument rated as well. And I'm just happy to be here to talk about safety with you guys.
Hi, so I'm Matt McCann. I'm the current program manager for the surface team within the program management organization. So we're tasked with implementing, the new NAS systems, particularly in the surface surveillance area, the ASDAX, ASSC systems. A lot of the people probably don't realize, but the PMO within the FAA, has, close to 1,000 employees. So we're a pretty large organization, managing all the different systems, from communications, navigation, surveillance. I'm also a pilot, flight instructor. I've been a pilot now for 25 years. Involved in surface surveillance systems for 22, so pretty much my entire career in surface. So I have that background from being the engineer, doing the testing and evaluation of all those systems, and as well as understanding what the operational side of those things are.
Hello, my name is Chris Corapi, controller at Cincinnati Tower and Tracon. In addition to working at CVG and controlling traffic, I'm also an active surface surveillance national representative. So I work alongside Matt in the program office with his team leads and systems engineers on all of our ASDX, ASSC systems, and anything really that touches those systems. From a day-to-day operation, my goal is to make sure that those systems are doing what controllers around the NAS want and making sure that it works. We've also been working over the last year on our newest program, which is Surface Awareness Initiative. SAI is meant for airports that don't have ASDX or ASSC, and we're equipping them with ADS-B tower displays that show traffic in real time to the controllers in the tower and in the TRACON. Right now we're deployed at four sites, and we're working on 14 by the end of December.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. So if you guys have any surface surveillance questions, or if you have an ASD issue or an ASSC issue, or if you're interested more in the Surface Awareness Initiative, the SAI that Chris had just mentioned, guess who you guys contact? Chris. So Chris, for the benefit of everybody here, because I don't think sometimes we forget that we have other folks that can help us, right? So for us, as a controller, how do I reach out to you?
Well, whenever I talk to somebody, I always hear, Bridget sent me your way.
That's true.
Bridget is our runway safety rep, but if anyone ever wants to get a hold of me for any ASD issues or anything that's involving SAI, surface@natca.net, easiest way to do it.
Okay, so again, if you have any problems with your ASD, ASSC, or anything to do with the surface surveillance portfolio, you can reach out to Chris, just surface@natca.net. And I'm Bridget Singratanakul. I'm your NACA National Runway Safety Representative. I'm fortunate to also be the IFACA Aerodrome Design and Operations Panel Specialist. And I also get to work with these guys all the time. So anytime that I'll talk to Jason if we're working out specific airport issues. From a headquarters perspective, we'll touch base and then filter that back down to the facilities where needed. Kyle and I will work through different issues, not only on a national perspective, but for the service area. He also wears an additional hat for quality assurance, which is kind of a different perspective too. And then while we were going through the process for the Surface Awareness Initiative, and actually runway status lights, I've been able to work with Matt and Chris here too. So the nice part about this is everybody on this panel has the ability to contact any one of each other at any point in time, and we work with each other quite a bit. A little bit more about me, I do have my commercial multi. I have not flown in a while, I need to get back up, but I do have my commercial multi-engine license, and back in the day I got to work traffic more out of DFW, so pretty cool. I do want to say we do have Slido available for us, so at any point in time while we're up here chit-chatting, if you'd like to send in a question for us to look at, go ahead. You can see it up on the screens here, but just join us at Slido, send in your questions, and we'll be able to address them as they come through. Now, soon we're going to go ahead and talk about more of the pilot and controller, the mitigations, as well as the emerging technologies being implemented. But Kyle, quite frankly, runway safety has been all over the news, right? I don't think anybody has missed that. And it's been keeping us fairly busy. So Kyle, let's start off. We're going to start off by looking at where we were last year and where we are now when it comes to statistical information.
Okay, great. So, I'm not sure, yep, there's a slide there. So these are some numbers that we came up with for FY23. We don't have all the data for FY24 yet, but we wanted to share this with you and kind of compare year to date where we're at now compared to where we were at a year ago. So last year in the NAS, we had 54.3 million takeoffs and landings. That is only at towered airports. That does not include any tug operations. I know in an airport like Atlanta alone does 30, 40, 50,000 tug operations a year. Those are not included in that. Does not include any airport ops, does not include any runway inspections, does not include ARF for emergencies or ARF drills or even aircraft repositions if they have to enter a movement area, cross a runway, maintenance hangar, wherever they may be. That number is strictly takeoffs and landings in towered airports. Out of that 54.3 million operations, we had 1,760 runway incursions. That is less than 0.1% of the time where we had a runway incursion during a takeoff or a landing. And based on those, if you look at our rate, our runway incursion rate, we are getting about 3.25, 3.26 last year per 100,000 operations. This year so far, year to date, we're down a good 5 to 7% at 3.09% for this year to date. Now, the next set of numbers we're going to look at are pretty consistent year over year. We have about roughly, give or take a percent or two, 60% pilot deviations each year. 20% of those, additional 20% are operational incidences, and about 20-ish% are from vehicle pedestrian deviations. If we want to look at something I really want to point out that I think we're really improving on and doing increasing our safety as, if we look at our fiscal year 23 operational instances, we had 283 from October 1st through the end of July. I included the same data for FY24 because that's what we have fully processed in our runway safety office so far. We're a very data-centric organization, and we can really pull data and stats from anywhere we want, any month, any sort of operation. So we had 283 operational instances compared to 251 this year. That's leading to over a 10%, 12% decrease this year from the operational instance side. Let's define an operational incident real quick. An operational incident, you see the pilot deviation. I think we're all pretty familiar how a pilot deviation is determined. The vehicle pedestrian deviations, obviously the vehicle, or if you have maybe construction on foot or someone wanders onto the airfield, can be considered the vehicle pedestrian deviation side of that. Operational instance, what we're talking about when we talk about that number is any event that is led to by the action or inaction from ATC. So
Kyle, I want to jump back a little bit to that 54.3 million takeoff and landings. So the risk of a runway incursion is always present in the National Airspace System, right? Anytime you're approaching a runway, whether you're crossing it, whether you're taking off on it, whether you're landing on it, or you could have ARF that's going out there, right? So you could have a ops vehicle that's on the runway for inspection. Do you think we're on runways more than 54.3 million times?
Oh yeah, I think that's where we don't really consider, like I said, all the tug operations. I mean, the reposition, and this is only at towered airports that we're tracking. So that number is probably astronomically higher than what we actually are seeing here.
And really what I'm getting there is we take the baseline of 54.3 million, and then we put that towards the times that we had a mistake, which was 1,760, right? And that delineates into your risk. But we're not taking into consideration is all the amazing times and all the successful times that, I mean, heck, Atlanta does how many tug operations a year?
Oh, actually, we just talked to the rep earlier about this, trying to get exact numbers. Somewhere between 30 and 50,000 just tug operations a year, and many of those are crossing the runway between the Delta hangar on the north side, getting to and from the terminal. Depending on their operation, they may be crossing the runway, 2 runways too.
So I'd venture to say our rate is a lot lower than what it actually is if we looked at the number of occurrences where we're actually entering and exiting runways. So again, that's just a perspective of, hey, what does the NAS look like, and the National Airspace System look like in terms of safety? Now, I see that we've had a reduction of about 12% for operational incidents. And actually, I believe in our, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Kyle, but with our category A and B runway incursions, have those, I mean, the news says one thing. The news says our numbers are but what's really going on?
Right, so let's talk about the category A's and B's. Categories A's and B's, it's what we in runway safety consider a significant, serious runway incursion. A category A runway incursion is defined by a narrowly avoided collision. Category B is something that poses a significant risk of collision, and evasive action may have been taken to avoid it. So if we go back and use the same stats for this year as we did, for this operation as we did for the last, with the October 1st through the end of July, we had 23 category A's and B's for FY23. This year, we have 8 category A's and B's. That's a phenomenal decrease. Let's go one step further and dig a little more granularly into the operational incident side of that. FY23, 10 operational instances. This year, down to 4 guys. 4 operational instances, category A and B. That's probably the lowest I've seen since my time in runway safety as far as the operational incidents go. So, I mean, kudos to everybody in this room that is helping improve the safety of that and really getting the word and the knowledge out about the systems and the mitigations we have out there.
So in looking at that, is there anything that you could overall say, hey, we're doing better at this? Like, what element are we doing better at?
Yeah, I think we're just really eliminating the high-risk situations better. We have this really robust system in the runway safety organization that is combined with, we're going to talk about some things, some of the other mitigations we have out with arrival alert notices and pilot handbooks and from the flight deck video and some of the other technologies that are merging with SAI and some of those. And then on Jason's side, some of the pilot controller stuff they're working with at LAX and different forums where we're really getting the word out there. And I think at the end of the day, what we're doing is really taking that big risk out of play the best way we know how, through just a lot of collaboration. Beyond just the A's and B's, the same though, you see the slide that just came up, I know there's a lot on here, but all this says right here is we are having about the same amount of runway incursions year over year, but guess what? We're working a lot more traffic every year. So our RI rate is actually declining year over year for the last 4 years. So everybody talks this pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, what was it like before COVID, what was it like after COVID? You know, since we've come out of COVID and rebounded with that traffic continually increasing year and year, our runway incursion rate, which is that value that we talked about before of how many runway incursions are we having per so many operations. This chart, we have it on the millions. So we're looking at this year, we're at 30.9 runway incursions per 1 million operations.
So for our folks here in the audience, I go and I file a mandatory occurrence report, right? So after I file a mandatory occurrence report or an MOR, where does that go? Like, does that just go to runway safety, or who touches it? What happens?
That's a great question, and Bridget, you kind of alluded, and I think I introduced myself a little bit, wearing two hats right now. So when you in the facility file that MOR, first place it's gonna go is we're going straight to the quality assurance office, who's gonna review it and validate the MOR. We're either gonna validate it as a loss, a not a loss, a surface event, maybe a pilot deviation, a list of things that we have in there that we can see on our side of the MOR that the facility necessarily can't see. Since we're on the top of the runway safety, once we validate something in quality assurance as a surface event, it's then going to come to us at the runway safety team, and it's going to come to the runway safety team at the headquarters level who does a lot of the data tracking. From there, they're going to categorize and give a severity ranking to that event, which is where really all of our data comes from. This is all these slides with all these data, these numbers is all compiled by that team there. So once they have the data, they look at it, they determine, yes, this is a runway incursion. Yes, this was attributed to an operational incident, a pilot deviation, or a vehicle pedestrian deviation. It goes to what's called the Runway Incursion Assessment Team, or the RIAT for short. And what they do is there's 3 separate LOBs in there. You have a representative from the Air Traffic Organization, you have a representative from Flight Standards, and a representative from airports. And they must unanimously decide on the severity of that ranking. So it's not one person looking at the data saying, ooh, I think that one was a B, or I'm in a good mood today, so I'm gonna give this one a C. Mm-hmm. It is a unanimous decision across 3 lines of business with a lot of expertise in the room, deciding what that can be. I guess I should back up one step, just for everybody who's not totally familiar with the severity ranking. A's and B's most serious. We also have C's and D's, which are the most commonly ranked, A through D. We also have E's, but it's normally attributed to other, not enough information. So A through D is really what we rank our runway incursions on, with A being the most severe and D being the least severe, or no conflict during the runway incursion.
So from the time that Chris is filing an MOR to the time where it actually gets categorized, there's quite a few different steps that take place prior to actually getting to the end event, really.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite a long process, quite a thorough process, and we really evaluate each step. We even assign event codes to them to kind of really get granular and find a little bit of a root cause analysis in those runway incursions.
So to continue that thought process a little bit further, what is runway safety doing to combat the unexpected for our pilots and for our controllers?
Oh, that's kind of a loaded question, but we can get into it a little bit. So we have several products out right now that we're designing to help the mitigations. One of our newest, and we'll call it one of our more fancy paper products, are called the pilot handbooks. We have 86 pilot handbooks out right now. I like to think of it as the one-stop shop. Know before you go, get everything you need to know about the airport, whether you're departing at that airport, arriving at that airport, doing a run-up or some sort of maintenance check on the aircraft. It really tells you everything you need to know top to bottom about that airport. Embedded in these pilot handbooks are also arrival alert notices. One of the newest products we have at Runway Safety. Call them AANs for short. An AAN is basically a first-person view from the cockpit, about 1,000 feet AGL, and what we try to do is identify where there might be some risk in the NASP, whether it's closely spaced parallels or offset thresholds, or if we are noticing or identified a problem between a runway and a parallel taxiway where there's been wrong surface alignments. Anything like that where there might be confusion. We've even put out a couple lately where we have 2 airports in close proximity where the aircraft have been lining up for the wrong airport. So that's one of the mitigations we have out. We have about 50 AANs currently published right now, with 2 or 3 in the pipeline that should be coming out in the next charting cycle. Again, one more thing we have in the pilot handbook are from the flight deck videos. If you guys have stopped by the runway safety booth yet so far, you'll see on the TV behind me and Bridget from the flight deck video. It's another first-person account of what it looks like flying into that airport or departing that airport. And it really gives you a picture of what to look out for. Are there hot spots? Are there closely spaced parallels? Is there any sort of weird, funky geometry on the field? You know, when I exit this runway, am I going to come up on the next runway quick? Do I need to know where the hold shorts are? And so forth. And those are really gaining a lot of traction. We have over 860,000 views on from the flight deck videos right now, and just over 125 different videos that are out for awareness. So
the way I look at this is there's not many FAA products out there that have basically 900,000 views, right? In other words, for our folks, if we want to get a pilot handbook, or if we want to get a from the flight deck video, how do Chris and I go about doing that?
Right, great question. Where do I find this? A couple different ways you can find the pilot handbooks, and the pilot handbooks are going to have all this information. They're going to have the from the flight deck video, the AANs, all the different information. I mean, I encourage you guys to go check out a pilot handbook. There is so much information there, and it's so easy to read. You start reading through, you're like, oh, this is way easier than me just flipping through 5 different books to find this, and I got to decipher this. And but the easiest way is faa.gov/ and then the 3-letter identifier of the airport if it has one, or they're also available on ForeFlight where that's available.
Perfect. So NAC has been part of the evolution of handbooks as well as these from the flight deck videos since the very beginning. And one of the big things that I really wanted to see was being able to get information directly from you as a line controller that's keying up the mic to Jason, the one that's keying up the mic. And forget about all the extra middle stuff in the middle, right? So what do you want us to know, or what do we want Jason to know prior to flying into our airports? In other words, that's what the pilot handbook is. So if you work at a mixed-use airport or happen to work a lot of GA, this is a great product for you to be able to get information directly to, in particular, the general aviation community. It's available right on ForeFlight, so when they're on ForeFlight, they can click down to it, they can pull up the information, they can get the link to the video if they want to watch an 8-minute video. The videos actually take place on the surface where we can show the hot spots. So you're taxiing around, you get to see what it actually looks like and what potential issues or threats could be there. Jason, I wanted to know in particular, are you guys seeing these products? I mean, we're saying this in fairly high numbers, but are these helping you guys at all?
Yeah, I think it's great to see all these products come out. I was mentioning earlier when we were talking about this panel, it's a matter of kind of breaking down the tribal knowledge. That's all the information that you see in the facility that isn't necessarily written down in a source document. And so it really gets that information out to the pilot group. I think we've seen these products leverage more in the general aviation space than in the air carrier space. But it begs the question, how do you collaborate with facilities? Where are your airline counterparts? Where are your general aviation counterparts? Opening up that dialogue. There's so many different things that we've worked on over the years that only happened because we had that close working relationship to be able to identify, hey, do you know that like Bravo 8 is actually the preferred exit? If you could get off at Bravo 8 instead of Bravo 9, that would be really helpful to us. That's information that goes into the pilot handbook, and then it's information that we can put into our internal guidance to crews, whether it's at a Delta or another carrier.
You know, what's really interesting about that too, Jason, is all these are developed at the local level. They're developed by the facility for the facility, and they're designed with collaboration between the stakeholders, the flight schools, the other industries that use the airport. So it's really a collaborative effort to get something like this together, whether it's from an air carrier level or a general aviation level.
The other thing to keep in mind, just to follow up on that, is as pilots, particularly in the air carrier space, I'm used to going to a lot of the same airports. And so I'm in my comfort zone when I go to Atlanta and Orange County and San Francisco. But all of a sudden I end up on a charter in Charlotte or O'Hare, and I'm kind of a fish out of water. And so having this information, whether it's on the GA side or on the air carrier side, is really helpful. And on the flip side, there's lots of experienced pilots that have probably not looked through a lot of the fine details of every chart because they're locals. So this helps locals become more familiar, and people that aren't locals essentially become a local and become familiar with what the controllers want them to know.
So Jason, what are some of the leading reasons that you see? Because you do a lot for ALPA, right? And you also help with the ASAP process. So what are some of the leading reasons why you're seeing why pilots deviate from an ATC clearance?
Sure, so from a runway incursion perspective or even a surface incident, one of the big challenges is distractions in the operation. Whether that's a runway change or a passenger that just got up in the back of the cabin, and so we have a call from the flight attendant. We may have winds that change, and so our takeoff performance now, we need to grab some new takeoff performance numbers to be able to safely account for that tailwind. So it's really important, and we try to stress with all of our crews to stay as heads up as possible when taxiing the airplane, because so often when we cross runways or we cross busy taxiway intersections, if one pilot is heads down, that takes 50% of the equation away from that situational awareness. So having tools like airport moving maps, as an industry, I think we're starting to move away from static airport diagrams and start moving into dynamic airport charting, where the actual information on the chart changes as we taxi around the airport and it's oriented in the correct direction, so that really enhances our situational awareness. In the business aviation space and GA space, many new avionic OEMs are starting to leverage more of an exocentric view on the primary flight display when taxiing around the airport, so they actually see basically a 3D rendered view of the airport and all the markings. So we're definitely making strides, but we consistently see, at least on the safety reporting side, distractions and then even workload management. Just managing, hey, there's a big lineup. I'm going to taxi out single engine today because we're going far and we need to conserve fuel. Timing that second engine start and making sure that we're not caught off guard and we're not rushed. And if we are rushed, we have to set the brake and make some time and say, hey, we need to pull off to the side and kind of get our act together before we proceed.
So it sounds like a lot of how to remove distractions from the flight deck and just keeping your eyes out the window, right? Prioritizing. Chris, from a controller's perspective, how do you guys, where you guys work in particular, how do you help mitigate runway incursions from taking place?
I think what you just said for the pilots is the same for the controllers, keeping your eyes out the window and standing as part of the tower team. Whether that's taking out binoculars and checking the taxiways, or using ASD or SAI at the airports that have it to help scan. And also using memory aids, using a placard to say, hey, I'm crossing with local right now and a runway's closed. Or I know there's some airports as well that use physical matchbox cars or actual helicopters to say, hey, I have a helicopter coming into the taxiway, Mike. Or ops is out there on the runway doing a surface check. And I also do a little plug for Jamie Sanders out there in runway, who's part of our RID team, our runway incursion device. Please go out there and check out the RID device, which is going to be deployed to some airports as well.
So I'm glad you brought up memory aids, because Jason, that makes me think of for you. So for controllers, we have mandates, and it says like, hey, we need to have a memory aid for if we have lineup and wait operations, if we're departing, if we're landing, if we're crossing a runway. So for a pilot, I know there's a lot of checklists, but what do you guys do on the flight deck?
Yeah, so one of the things we emphasize is writing down the taxi clearance, or at least finding a way to recall that taxi clearance. So we often use the scratch pad in our FMS to type in what the taxi route is as we're taxiing out. The syntax can change, but I use a double slash for hold short and an X for cross. So that's a reminder. That's my memory aid for whether we're clear to cross or we have to hold short of a particular taxiway. We also have the ability to highlight things on our airport moving map or our charts. So I'll often highlight things as we get the clearance when the airplane's still stopped with a red highlighter to remind me, hey, I need to hold short of this position, or we need to monitor the tower on this taxiway. So there's all sorts of different things that we use as memory aids. And if in doubt, we ask, right? Yeah. That's what we push is, clarify the instruction before you cross the runway or before you cut the airplane off. Is that really the Airbus that you meant for me to follow? Oh, actually, it's a 7.3. So making sure that we have the confidence to be able to slow the operation down when necessary to clarify those clearances. But being able to have those memory aids is something that's vitally important on a complex taxiway. The taxiways that we travel on now have varying geometry from airport to airport. As much as we like to keep things standard, the taxiways ebb and flow and are designed very differently in many different airports.
So Kyle, you have the hat of the Eastern Service Area Runway Safety Team Manager, right?
Yep.
You also are fortunate enough to have another hat, which happens to be the Eastern Service Area Quality Assurance Manager. From that perspective in particular, what do you think is, whether it's the leading mitigation that you're seeing for runway incursions, or what can you add?
So when it comes to mitigations and leading mitigations, it's, I think to kind of touch back on what Chris was talking about with memory, it's really making sure that in the tower, I'm only speaking from the controller side here, really in the tower, we got to use our memory aids. We got to follow those memory aids. No matter how mundane or easy or simple the operation seems, you got to pull that strip out every time and put it down in front of your stop bar, right? We got to follow the SOP. Those rules in the SOP were written for a reason, I hate to be the quality assurance guy up here, being the compliance police, but they're there for a reason. They're not made to be broken. They really were written in the name of safety, and trying to stick with those and follow them every time, create that habit so that it feels weird when you don't do it, right? Keeping that in mind. And then also, biggest one, guys, we all hear this every day as a controller, right? Phraseology, phraseology, phraseology. We have to use the right phraseology. We have to make sure we get our readbacks whenever we need a read back for hold short. So from that side of it, I think just sticking to it's almost sticking to the basics, right?
Yeah.
Let's go back to the simpleness and stick to the basics and do what we are designed to do, and that's gonna be our biggest help in mitigating these runway incursions.
So to kind of summarize a little bit of what we talked about here, and from what I see in particular, the biggest contributing factor for a runway incursion, whether it's in particular for a pilot deviation or for a vehicle pedestrian deviation, is simply somebody lost situational awareness. So being able to eliminate those distractions, being able to keep the eyes out the window, clear and concise phraseology from the controllers, that always helps as well. But the number one reason for a runway incursion across the NAS is simply somebody crossed the hold short line without authorization. So your readbacks were correct. Everything from our side of the house, every box was checked. But unfortunately, a mistake took place. And again, we should always be striving for zero, but that's 1,700-ish times out of 54.3 million opportunities for a mistake. And actually far more than that, because we're not taking into consideration every time we cross a runway or get on a runway. So there's far more opportunities than the 54.3 million. I wanted to take a quick second we're gonna start getting into technology a little bit more. I want to take a couple of the questions off of the SIDO. And the first one here is, can a facility collaborative work group, such as a local safety council, request one of these handbooks to be done at their facility, and if so, how? So I'm going to send you to me. So again, I'm your NATCA National Runway Safety Representative. My email is super easy. It's runwaysafety@natca.net. So runwaysafety@natca.net. Shoot me an email. You could also, I'll throw Kyle under the bus. So Kyle, Vincent, you can also email him if you'd like. You can just look up his FAA email. But start with us, and then we'll start working towards that. We do have a team that helps us. And again, those products that you saw, from the flight deck videos, the handbooks, those are all made at the local level. So you guys will be filling out the outline to put into this handbook. And then after you're done filling it out, then I review each and every one of them prior to publication, as well as the runway safety team. So the first step in getting one of those, shoot me an email. Again, runwaysafety@natca.net.
Yeah, if I can add to that a little bit too, Bridget, beyond just coming to Bridget and helping, through the union line, every single airport in the NAS, every towered airport has a runway safety program manager assigned to them. Whoever runs the RSAT at your facility at the local level should know who that RSPM is and should be in touch with them constantly. Also, run it through their chain, through Bridget's chain. We'll get it done as quick as we can, and the more pressure you put on it, the easier it's going to be for us to get it done and move forward with it.
Yeah, and I know this sounds kind of dorky, but I love the fact that it's on different products, including ForeFlight, where a pilot could just go to it and just pull it up and download it right there, and I have all that information right in my fingertips, which has been something that we've been striving for a long time and finally got to. So as we're transitioning into technologies, Jason, what type of technologies, whether it's commercial or generally aviation or business side of the house, what type of technologies are available for you guys on the flight deck?
Sure. So on the GA side, I'm a GA pilot as well, and crazy enough to fly some fun stuff like helicopters and seaplanes and things like that. But ForeFlight and other EFB providers, electronic flight bag providers, are starting to leverage alerting technologies. And then on the Part 25 certified aircraft, air carrier style airplanes, there's technology like RAS, runway awareness and alerting technology, that actually will give you situational awareness via audio feedback as to whether you're approaching a runway or on a runway. New technologies being developed currently as we speak on basically TCAS on the ground, if you will. So how to enhance situational awareness and alerting to the cockpit when there's airplanes on final behind you on a runway, or as you're crossing a runway or taxiing onto a runway. So all sorts of neat things on the horizon, and many of which are already developed and out in the field.
So I would assume it takes a little while to get from the GA community and the business side of the house back into the commercial side of the house.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the air carrier side, we have to think about consistency in fleets and pilot training and all that fun stuff. So we can't just roll it out on certain sub-fleets of airplanes without affecting pilot training and making sure that that equipage carries on as we purchase and acquire new airplanes.
So there's over 500 towered airports out there, right? And we have roughly, I believe, 44 airports that currently have surface surveillance with an alerting capability. The rest of you guys, or the rest of us, we're using binoculars. And I think the hot topic that has been going on a little bit is Surface Awareness Initiative. So Matt, what new technology, and I just kind of hit it off there, what new technology is being implemented to help with situational awareness for our air traffic controllers?
Okay, so before I talk, specifically about SAI, so let me talk a little bit about, how we got there, right? So if you remember back in early 2023, we had some, close calls made national news. So as a result, the FAA administrator called a FAA Safety Summit, where he brought together over 200 different people from the industry to develop recommendations to improve aviation safety. So one of those recommendations was the formulation of our surface safety portfolio. So the surface safety portfolio included 3 programs. So we had our approach runway verification, we had runway incursion device, and we had SAI. So SAI, is a solution that provides controllers the ability to see their targets out on the airport movement area. It utilizes ADSB as the surveillance source. How we got there, we then formed and had an industry day in June where we brought together industry to look at, cost-effective, readily available solutions that are available, quickly. We then released a market survey to industry to learn a little bit more about the different products out there. We took that information and started doing all the contractual actions and getting something out to put out to industry. We released that the end of December, right before the New Year's Day, and then got responses back from industry. And in April, we developed a qualified product list. So that's what vendors are eligible and meet the requirements of our specification. And those vendors then we awarded contracts to deploy to 4 facilities. Those 4 facilities have since went operational in June. So just looking at that time frame, very fast paced. Everything was moving super quickly. If anybody's seen any of the other programs, how long it takes to get that to actually be deployed in the NAS, it takes years to get something out there. But SAI was something that was fast-tracked. All the stakeholders came together and worked with one another to figure out how to get it done quickly. I've never seen a program move as quickly through the acquisition process and getting through where we don't even know what's out there to we have it running out in the field.
And I just wanted to say, when Matt says stakeholders and he said we, NATCA was at the table since day one. I think that's a true testament to how fast and how well the system was deployed.
It is. So when you mentioned acquisition process, I kind of giggled a little bit inside because honestly, what you guys did, and what kind of we all did, because runway safety was involved, obviously the program management office, NATCA was involved, including yourself, myself, Mark Ostronic, a couple other folks as well. So we're all at the table having these discussions. But these discussions that we're talking about usually take like 10 years, right? And what would normally take place in 10 years, you guys did in a year?
Less than a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, less than a year. So that's fairly remarkable in itself. So I do want to applaud that. And it really gives people hope is what it comes down to. That, hey, you'll be able to have something out there in the system that really can go to mixed-use airports and not just your core 30, right? So there's an element out there of, hey, we can expand this even further and further along. And I wanted to talk about a little bit with regards to so Chris, what type of criteria, in other words, for our facilities out there, what type of criteria was used to select the facilities for deployment?
Yeah, before SAI was even thought of, about 2 or 3 years ago, we sat on the operational needs assessment, which said, hey, there's airports out there that don't have any sort of ASD system that needs something. What airports are those and how do we classify them? So we sat down with a bunch of very smart mathematicians and gave weight to certain categories by air carrier volume, just overall volume, line of sight issues, weather. That all contributed to how we came up with our next airports that would receive the system, which is ultimately about a 500-page or 500 list of airports, and that's how we're rolling out with SAI.
So this is a testament to ATSAP in particular. So while we were working on the operational needs assessment, we also took in consideration other safety issues that were going on. I happen to be working a corrective action request, or CAR, that was developed because of the fact that you guys were filing ATSAPs. In correlation to that, it was a line of sight issue. So by having that corrective action request, we were able to tie that into really the algorithm needed to help accelerate or actually the location of that facility within the deployment factors, right? So I think that that's really a testament to the ATSAP program in itself. So as we're talking about this, Chris, what are some of the differences, so visually in particular, between ASD and Surface Awareness Initiative?
If you look at ASD and SAI side by side, they look very similar, and that was done intentional. We knew ASD worked, we knew the human factors that went into ASD, so we said, let's make it look just like that. There's no need to start from scratch. ASD is a decision support tool, which has mandatory actions that controllers must take if the system alerts. Controllers can also use ASD for position determination to determine where somebody is on the movement area. SAI is purely situational awareness as its current state. So we're using SAI as another tool for controllers to use to determine where people are on the taxiways and movement areas and help control their traffic.
So the way the systems are out, and there's multiple vendors, right?
3 vendors.
Okay, so we have 3 vendors out, and can our folks see what these look like at all, or?
Yeah, so all 3 vendors are actually right out there in the main room. They have their systems on display, demonstrating them. We also have our FAA surface safety portfolio booth, where you can find a little more information about the different products.
So in regards to SAI, or the Surface Awareness Initiative, is that just it? Are we able to build on it later, or like what's the vision for the future?
The idea at Industry Day that we had back in June of 2023 is that the system is able to be buildable, scalable, stackable based on controllers' needs. And the systems there's technologies out there within SAI that we could deploy that we have to test. But yeah, it is scalable and stackable.
And Matt, in particular, I'm kind of curious, so can we discuss the deployment? How many facilities, and we talked about this a little bit already, but how many facilities, I know less than a year, we went to 4 facilities.
Correct.
What are we looking like for the next year and beyond?
So currently, we awarded our next block of awards to those 3 vendors to deploy systems. We're planning on rolling out 14 more facilities before the end of the year. So my team's out there now going to each of the facilities, doing the site surveys, and we'll be doing the installations with the expectation that we'll have all 14 operational by the end of the year. So you're probably wondering, well, what's next after the end of the year? Well, we're going and currently packaging everything to bring it to our Joint Resources Council, which, you guys aren't familiar with, is, the group of executives that make the decisions of, where we prioritize our funding and what programs move forward. And based off of that decision in December, that'll determine what our final end state of SAI is. How many airports do we go to? What funding is provided for the program? But we're going to be moving forward at the same pace that we've been with the deployments.
That's pretty remarkable in itself. So I know everybody here is wondering, at least I am. So if I have an airport that doesn't have surface surveillance at this point in time, Matt or Chris, how do I go about getting my airport on the list?
Well, the list has been somewhat predetermined, but it's fluid. We're working with Runway Safety, your office and Kyle to determine if there's a need out there for other airports that may not be in the top X amount of airports that we're deploying to. There's definitely a need out there besides the ones that we've previously identified.
And to add to that, I'll say we looked at all the airports, right? You said there's over 500 towered airports. We only have 44 with ASDX or ASSC. We looked at all of them and we determined all those different factors that Chris mentioned, the visibility, and all of them are ranked based off a score. So we had the top 50 that we're going to be targeting, with the initial deployments, but there's room for that list to expand. And it all comes down to, funding. How much funding is available to deploy our products? If we had an infinite budget, we'd put it everywhere.
So
but it's
the
gonna
more
come
funding
down
we
with,
have, the more we can go to more facilities?
correct. So it's about prioritizing the airports given our funding situation.
So we've got 4 airports out there right now that have the system, right? We have 3 different vendors that are out there. Again, you guys, please go visit the different booths so you can see what these systems look like and provide feedback. But what I'd like to know is our controllers that are using the systems right now, has any of that feedback, are we doing anything with it?
Yeah, we're taking all the feedback in. I was just talking with Tyler Height, who's the Indy Tower FAC rep. And I remember about a year ago when I was talking to him, describing what SAI was going to be on the phone, he would just laugh and, all right, yeah, whatever you say. He didn't believe it. But we got buy-in, we deployed there in June, and he just told me that it took ground control from being the most hated position in the building to making it so much easier to see where the traffic is. They have an over 300-foot tower. They control diamonds at a flight school that's over 2.5 miles away. So this system really increased their situation awareness to make sure that everyone's moving where they are supposed to be going.
It probably helped with the workflow then.
Yeah, definitely.
So Jason, this makes me think of you guys, right? So this is a cool tool for us. I'm really excited for us. I think it's going to really change up the way we're working traffic in particular. For pilots, from your guys' perspective, your guys are, I already said there's over 500 towered airports out there. Currently 44 only have surface surveillance with alerting capabilities. And we're deploying the surface awareness initiative. Do you guys just automatically assume that all of our facilities have some type of surface surveillance?
So I don't think we have as much visibility as you'd think to what airports have surface surveillance. So I think at many of the Charlies and Bravo airports that we go to, I think that is, by and large, an assumption that is made, especially in low visibility operations. I'm very passionate about SMIGs. I'm currently working with a couple airports to implement SMIGs programs that don't have them right now. And that's one of the challenges that they've communicated is, hey, we don't actually have a tool to report where airplanes are or have an idea where airplanes are without geographic position markings because we don't have surface surveillance. And I think that's something that pilots probably overlook at a lot of airports, especially where we have low visibility operations. So something to keep in mind, and we're really excited to see the agency roll out SAI and leverage that at many airports that we operate out of.
And I appreciate that, Jason. One thing that I kind of want to switch over to is runway status lights. So runway status lights is currently deployed at 20 different airports, right? The program is in sustainment at the moment, but one of the topics that we talk about a lot is runway status lights. So Chris, can you kind of tell me a little bit more of what runway status lights is and what does it do for controllers?
Yeah, runway status lights is a passive system that runs off the ASD. The controllers really have no interaction with it other than to hit a kill switch if there was an issue. But it's more for the pilots. The lights turn on and off to show the status and verify an air traffic control clearance. So like Bridget said, they're at our 20 busier airports. And the feedback that we consistently get from the pilot community is that we want more. But we don't have more because of the funding issue.
Jason, what do they do for you?
So from a runway status light perspective, we very much appreciate the airports that have RWSLs. We'd like to see it leveraged more, not only at the airports that have it on more runways, but also at other airports in the NAS where it would definitely be of great value. Where I think it comes in immense value is where we have line of sight and geometry challenges. And geometry is not necessarily just the way the runways and taxiways are oriented, but other things like runway slope. We have airports in the NAS right now where you may not be able to see a taxiway downfield because the runway is sloped, whereas from the tower it is much more visible. And so having that reassurance and having those lights in a passive manner gives us a lot of reassurance and also gives us another safety tool in our toolbox, so to speak, to keep the operation safe.
Jason, when you are flying into an airport and you know that there's no surface surveillance and you know that they don't have runway status lights, is there anything different that you do to prepare as a pilot, like either pre-flight or pre-arrival, pre-approach?
I think definitely continued high vigilance is important at any airport, not only those that don't have runway status lights, but I think on the flip side, we also have to keep in mind what's our plan if the runway status lights do come on? You know, how are we going to handle that? And so that's something that we incorporate into our crew briefings. It's something that I've incorporated as a captain into my abort briefing before flying with a new crew member is, hey, one of the reasons we're going to abort is if the tower calls an abort or we have red runway status lights. That's a very valid reason to discontinue the takeoff. So we definitely do try to tailor it to where we're flying, but we very much look forward to the continued implementation and hopefully expansion of our WSL.
So Matt, I have to ask this. Are you guys planning on deploying this to any other airports?
Well, so that's a great question. So currently we're focusing our efforts on sustaining those existing systems. So we have 20 systems out there now. You know, that we started deployments back in 2011, finished our last in 2016. The equipment that we have out there now, you know, is naturally obsolescent. So we're going in the process now of going in and removing the old equipment and replacing it with the next generation hardware. So that even includes the fixtures. You know, the original runway status lights fixtures were incandescent. When you're cycling a light bulb on and off, an incandescent light bulb, naturally you have you know, a high failure rate. You know, with that, then, you know, requires a lot of maintenance intervention. So we're, you know, focusing our efforts on, you know, installing LED fixtures, the next generation communications equipment. So basically gutting the entire system, leaving just the light cans that are in the pavement and the cabling and replacing all the other equipment. As for beyond the, you know, 20 airports, so there are some efforts being done by our Next Gen organization looking at some new programs, one of them particularly called RIPSA, so it's the Runway Incursion Prevention Through Situational Awareness, which essentially takes a standalone surveillance system and ties it to a runway status light system. So they're evaluating that now currently, or they're installing it now for evaluation in San Antonio. Where they're putting, you know, runway status lights at particular runway taxiway entrance. So those are our runway entrance lights. You know, so from there, you know, there could be the opportunity of expanding those systems to airports that don't have the ASDs and the ASSC systems, and then the potential to, you know, bring in runway status lights to other airports, you know, exist as well. So we are looking at, you know, the data as well. When Chris mentioned with SAI, you know, the operational needs assessments, you know, everything we do in the FAA has, you know, cost-benefit analysis. You know, where do we get the most bang for our buck? And that's what happened with runway status lights. We took all the original ASDX airports and went through all the benefits and determined, you know, what is the most cost advantageous, and determined that was our 20 airports. So we're looking at that, re-looking and seeing if there's anything that changed, you know, new runways, and from there, and hopefully, you know, that'll inform what we do in the future. You know, again, I'll bring back funding contingent.
So I keep hearing a keyword being funding. So I want to talk about sustainment a little bit, because one of the things that I get calls on, and which then I push to Chris, because again, if you need to get a hold of Chris, he again is your National Surface Surveillance representative. It's just surface@natca.net. But in particular, we keep getting calls on addressing challenges for maintenance and technology refresh. Is there a plan that's associated with that for ASD, ASSC, RWSL? Like, is there anything you'd like to elaborate with that?
So I mentioned a little bit about our runway status light sustainment, but, you know, yes, in terms of our ASDX and ASSC, you know, our ASDX system, it's hard to believe that we started deployment back in 2003. So it's been out there for over 21 years now. ASDX and ASSC are pretty much IT systems, right? They have your standard processors, all the communications equipment, you know, tied to some of the different sensors. So as part of our sustainment efforts, we're focusing in on upgrading the hardware, you know, to the latest technology in terms of processors. We're looking at, you know, updating all the hardware or the software. Naturally addressing security vulnerabilities. That's a big thing that drives a lot of things we do in terms of hardware and updating the software, operating system, patches, you know, and it's not as simple as, you know, your normal PC pushes an upgrade to you and you download the patch and everything's good. Well, you know, for us, with that patch, we have to fully test everything to make sure we didn't break anything. You know, a simple thing of, okay, updating this driver for the sound card, then now we might not get alerts coming out of the speakers. So it's a very intensive process going through that. Looking at all that, you know, we're looking at our ASD3 radar, right? That's the big thing for our ASDX and ASSC systems. That provides the primary, non-cooperative sensor. That radar was deployed back in the early 90s. The company that developed it is no longer in business. There's no support from any vendors. So we're having challenges, and we're working regularly with the FAA Logistics Center to determine, what we can do to keep that radar running while we're working to replace it. So that's the good news, that we're working, and hopefully we'll have something out to industry before the end of this year, requesting proposals for a new radar and moving toward, removing and replacing those 31 radars that are deployed at the facilities.
That's good information, Matt. So I want to kind of transition over to communication and really talk about, so what I see on a daily basis basically is the frequent and often communication between whether it's different lines of businesses within the FAA, whether it's ALPA or APA or and NATCA coming together. The more frequently we communicate, I always feel like the better off we are. So I want to tag this over to Jason. Jason, how do airlines and their labor unions collaborate with facilities? Because sometimes I think the hardest thing that I'm seeing is just getting the right people in the room.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And I think the RSAT is a great process to do that, but we want to go one step further and have those working relationships with the right people in the right places. And so I would be remiss if I didn't mention ALPA's program, which is called the Airport Safety Liaison Program, ASL. The goal is really to be that conduit, to be that representative from across many different carriers to address safety concerns. And not just to address concerns that pilots and flight crews have, but also to be that sounding board for controllers to come to us and say, hey, we have a problem, can you help us fix this or communicate this to the pilots or help us leverage with the airport or the airport district office, some sort of change. And so we have a email structure, and I welcome everyone in the audience to write this down, ASL dot, and then the 3-letter airport code at alpa.org. So for example, asl.lax@alpa.org. That's an email that goes to me. And so if you need to get a hold of anyone at your airport or a nearby airport, that's a great way to leverage finding a contact and then making sure that you reach out and having that person not only in your contacts, but someone that you know and you can interact with on a first name, text message, phone call basis, so that when there's an issue, you can pick up the phone and say, hey, I have a problem, can you help me with this? What does your chart show? And I can do the same thing on the controllers, on the pilot side to the controllers and say, hey, we've had a couple of events that look like this. Can you tell me what your operational procedures are, and maybe we can work together to adjust them. So having that working relationship is just so important to be able to have a conduit to be able to resolve those issues at a really direct and local level in a pretty quick period of time.
I can't tell you guys how many times I've just reached out to Jason just to help each other, or vice versa, right? So Jason, there are a ton of volunteers here for NATCA, and there's a ton of volunteers for ALPA. So when you mention your airport safety liaisons, I'm assuming there's more than just a couple?
Yes, we have about 120 all over the United States that help interact with airports, with construction offices, with airport district offices. They are the pilot representative in the room at RSAT meetings, at user forums, all these types of activities to provide that flight crew perspective. Everyone comes with a unique perspective. The controllers see it from the tower or the radar room, and we see it from a different perspective, and I'd like to think that we offer a unique perspective. The airport also has an interesting perspective. I had an opportunity last year to drive on the airport just as a passenger with an airport ops vehicle. I couldn't believe, it's like the 405 freeway. There's a section on the south side of LAX that's 4 lanes. You just can't believe that there's 18,000 people authorized to drive on the airport, which is just incredible. So I think leverage the volunteers that are throughout the system, and it's not just ALPA, there's also volunteers through the other labor organizations, APA, SWAPA, and other carriers, but let this perhaps be an initial introduction to get you in touch with the right person. We don't necessarily have an ASL in all places. I happen to volunteer in Hawaii because we don't have any ASLs in Hawaii, so I take that load and some of the other surrounding airports. But even if it's not the ASL for that airport, or there's not an ASL for your airport, we can get you in touch with the right person that can be that safety conduit.
So I'm going to highlight again, and there's a question that came through that, hey, what's the ASL contact information? So it's ASL dot, and then your 3-letter airport identifier at alpa.org. So if you want to get a hold of a line pilot that can help you out, if you have an SRM meeting that's coming up, why not talk to Jason ahead of time or somebody like that? Get on the same page, have a plan when you're coming into situations, right? If you have a runway safety action team meeting that's coming around the corner and you'd have a hard time getting pilots in the room, why would you not reach out and try to get somebody, a voice on the other side of the mic to come in and help those situations? So I know we're running out of time here a little bit, but runway safety action team meetings are a vital element in terms of keeping communication and lines of communication up between different lines of businesses, and to include NATCA as well as our the different operators that are on the field, right? So Kyle, from your perspective, what makes a good RSAT?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, Bridget. So for an RSAT to be considered an RSAT, or a Runway Safety Action Team, it is hosted by the local facility, and the only two required members for an RSAT are the air traffic, a member from air traffic, and a member from the airport authority. If I can suggest and urge every facility out here to do one thing to make a good, I guess it's three things technically, but one plan to make a good RSAT is to plan, to participate, and to come up with a product, right? We have to plan, you gotta plan your meeting, you gotta investigate where your safety risks are, you have to look at the data beforehand, you have to really kind of dig in and see what you wanna talk about with all the other LOBs, and really come up with the structure of the meeting. Don't just go in there blind and say, I know I got this slide deck for runway safety, we're gonna go through this. No, really get involved and plan that meeting. Next is you gotta participate. Every person in this room can be part of a runway safety action team meeting. It's really open to anyone who wants to contribute to the safety at that airport, and participation is key. The more discussion we have, the more participation we have, the better off we're gonna be in the long run. And finally, come up with some products from that RSAT. There's the product from the RSAT is called the RSAP, the Runway Safety Action Plan. That is outlined with what happened in the meeting. At the end of it, there's action items that are not mandatory for anybody, but they're something that you will take, or anybody in this room can take as a action item and be responsible for it and be accountable for seeing it through to its finish.
And I'll just share, your RSAT doesn't necessarily have to be a one-time-a-year event.
No, it doesn't. There's no requirement to do it once. It is required to do it at least once a year. You can have one every month if you want, though.
And so we see that. San Francisco is a great example. Shout out to San Francisco Airport. They host a monthly RSAT. Now, there's one annual big RSAT, if you will, face-to-face. But even outside the RSAT process, we have user forums or airside tech committee meetings that are held on a monthly basis at many of the airports in the Western Pacific region, just as an opportunity to collaborate with all the different stakeholders, whether that's the airport, the construction office, air traffic management. All these different things have impacts on all these different stakeholders, and just having an opportunity, a conduit to have that conversation is so important. So even if you can't support it on a monthly frequency, biannually or quarterly is so important to keep that conversation flowing.
So big things I wanted you guys to kind of walk away from today. If you need anything with surface surveillance, whether it's your ASD or ASSC, you're looking into SAI, contact Chris at surface@natca.net. If you need anything with your runway, anything to do with your airport, I mean, it could be anything from construction to, hey, we're having, this runway keeps getting closed during the most inopportune times. Feel free to reach out to me at runwaysafety@natca.net. And if you want to talk to a line pilot like Jason over there, ASL your three-letter identifier at alpa.org, right?
Correct.
All right, so again, we talked about quite a few things here. Thank you guys, we appreciate your time, and I hope everyone has a wonderful conference.